Welcome to another edition of Nutmeg Chatter presents the Claw's Corner. Today's episode features one of the pioneers of the American power metal movement, Sacred Oath. They are currently working on their 11th release. Please welcome singer and guitarist Rob Thorne, guitarist Damiano Christian, and guitarist Billy Smith to the show. Guys, so glad to have you in the Claw's Corner.
Howdy, howdy.
Great to be
Thanks
here,
for having
Rich.
us.
All right, long time. We've known each other for a very long time.
You're one of the original Oath Bangers.
Oath Bangers, yes, which we will talk about. 1986, so it's been a couple years. So let's go back. Let's start with the present. You have a release coming out soon. It's called Return of the Dragon. Tell me about that.
Well, we just started recording it, so I'd say we're probably looking at like 2021.
Okay.
Mostly because we're not in a huge hurry to finish it, and also because we're approaching the recording process so differently this time around. We demoed the whole thing out, which we've never done, and it's given us all kinds of great ideas and also opened up our minds to trying different techniques for getting the tracking down. And you can see some of these things on our Facebook page and on Instagram because we're documenting it. And so I'd say it's going to be the average length for us, 10 to 12 songs, about an hour's worth of music. We're super psyched about the quality of the music, though.
Now, you have your own recording studio, Angel Thorne Music.
I do.
That's
and I have for a long time.
Yeah.
So of all, honestly, the only studio album we've done that wasn't tracked at my studio was the debut, Crystal Vision. Everything since then's been tracked in my studio.
Well, I love your motto for the band. Old school metal in a modern world.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's how you can describe us, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Because we are old school.
Yeah.
I mean, we listen to a lot of, current music, but when we create, it just comes from that place that inspired us really back in the mid 80s. And it's just, that's just in our DNA. It's just unavoidable.
Now, for you, who are some of your biggest influences growing up?
I got to say that, because here we are right now in Connecticut, Fates Warning was a huge influence on us. Huge. And, the John Arch era Fates Warning. And
Awaken the Guardian is one of the best local albums.
Yeah.
Or even not even local, just one of the best albums. I love Awaken the Guardian.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I love Awaken the Guardian, but if you asked me which album of theirs was most influential on me, it would definitely be Spectre.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a
Spectre
great one as well.
And that's mostly because, that was when we were introduced to them. And they were mentors to us.
They were really good, too. I mean, you opened up for them
Yeah.
many times at the Agora Ballroom in
Mhm.
West Hartford, which no longer exists, but that was a great place.
Yeah. Pete became friends with Jim Matheos, and they gave us opportunities to open for them and lots of good advice and just mute. But, beyond that, musically, I mean, we were so inspired by what they were doing, with the progressive end of metal. Because at that time, we were also super influenced by Merciful Fate and King Diamond. So melodic, progressive-oriented metal. But of all those bands, I mean, we were also very influenced by like Megadeth and Metallica. So there's an element to Sacred Oath that the other bands I've mentioned don't have, which is that we also had a thrash side.
Yeah.
And, especially in the early years.
Well, yeah, it's a great combination because you have the power metal, you have the thrash side, and it's very melodic. So
Right.
it's a great combination, and you're a very well-rounded band. That's what I've always loved about you guys.
Yeah, it can make it difficult to categorize us.
Yeah.
But that's not something we've ever been super concerned about.
The year was
I don't have much of a
1985.
memory left.
Well, I'll refresh your memory in some of these parts. Year was 1985. You and your friend Pete Altieri started Sacred Oath while you were still in high school.
Yeah, can you believe that?
So you've been together.
And so let me flesh out some details there. Before Sacred Oath, Pete Altieri and myself and Kenny Evans were in a band together.
Kenny is the drummer.
Kenny's the drummer, and we were in a band called Wolfbane, and it was my second band. So this is my freshman year of high school, and I wanted to play with these guys. They were juniors, and I was a freshman, and they wanted to do all metal, and I was like in a Police cover band,
Hey, I love the Police as well.
Hey,
so.
it was an opportunity to sing. I said, I'll do the Police songs. I actually kind of like the Police.
I love the Police.
But I was like, I'll do this, but can we do a couple Black Sabbath songs? And they threw me a bone. But I hooked up with Pete and Kenny, and we had this band that lasted, 6 months to a year. And then about a year later, Pete and I decided we'd been in a couple other bands since then, and we pulled Sacred Oath together. And by then, that was my sophomore year of high school.
Well, you came out with a demo. It was entitled Shadow Out of Time. That really put you on the map.
Well, that's the one that put us on the map, but there was a demo before Shadow Out of Time that was just called Sacred Oath and actually included Ferryman's Lair, which is still one of our more popular songs,
Oh, yeah.
and Battle Cry,
Oh, yeah.
and Prophecy. And that demo is what really did it for us locally
Okay.
in the Danbury area, because there weren't that many bands that were actually doing demo recordings. I mean, this was something that, nowadays everybody's on Spotify. But back
Exactly.
then it was like go into a recording studio and make a cassette demo and sell it in the local record store. There was nobody else doing that in Danbury. And that first demo really launched a grassroots movement fan base. Then when we went to Wallingford and recorded Shadow Out of Time at Trod Nozzle Studios with Fates Warning's live sound guy Dave Abrizzo producing, and he went on to produce a Crystal Vision for us as well.
I could tell you I had a demo. I listened to it so many times. I actually had to get another demo from you because it was no longer good.
Yeah.
So
Cassette days. Let me tell you why that is, Rich, because I was hand making those demos in my bedroom. I probably accidentally got some Elmer's glue on the actual magnetic side of the tape.
all right, so you owe me $25 for a new cassette player. No, you know what really impressed me back then is because talent is very important in a band, but you also knew how important marketing was. Your band at that time was so great at marketing. You were at Phoenix Records in Waterbury, Brass City Records, the record store in Danbury. I mean, you were everywhere, and that's how I first got in touch with you, because on there you said, if you get 10 people to write us a letter, we're going to send you a free shirt. I let everybody in my school listen to that demo. Next thing you know, I get a phone call from Pete Altieri saying, Rich, it's Sacred Oath, I'd love to meet you. And I became friends with you guys ever since. But the fact that you took the time to reach out to your fans, you made sure the music was good, but you also made sure it got to the people.
Well, let me tell you, that was all Pete Altieri. I was sort of the space cadet in the band that was in my bedroom writing the songs and focusing on that. Pete was so good at setting up in-store appearances and those kinds of, prize programs and all that stuff. And I learned so much from him watching him do that, and what a big part of our success that was. And so by the early 90s, I'd kind of acquired that skill from working with him, but he was instrumental in A, getting us started on that path, and B, teaching me how to do it.
Well, that demo, Shadow Out of Time, caught the attention of Mercenary Records. That was, 1987?
Yeah, that was in 87. So that was our second demo. And there was a guy who he ultimately became our manager, Sal Trapidi. And he was living in Queens or Brooklyn. And he was a writer. And he reviewed that demo for Metal Edge magazine. Remember Metal Edge magazine? Oh, yeah. And we were super psyched just to, wow, here we are still in high school, our demos being reviewed in this major magazine. And next thing you know, he's working at Mercenary, which was a new label that was part of a much bigger world label called Celluloid. And he turned the label on to us, and before we got, I think this first month of my senior year, we were negotiating a record contract with Mercenary.
Yeah, so you recorded your debut album, A Crystal Vision, at that time.
Yeah, well, yeah, so we signed that deal, and we recorded it in May of that year of 1987. And the record ended up coming out, I think, in January of 88. Yeah, that was huge. That was, so exciting for us.
I mean, even if you're not high school kids, but definitely as a young 17, 18-year-old, you're signed by a label going on tour. I'm sure you went on tour for a while.
Yeah. Well, yeah, before the record even came out, the label put us on a tour with Sal around the Midwest and in the Northeast. And, oh, my God, are you kidding me? As a 17-year-old kid being on the road
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I remember the first time we got back, I couldn't get out of bed for 2 weeks. I was like just so fried. My parents were like, I don't know if this is the lifestyle for you. I think they were worried I had mono or something.
Which bands did you play with back then? Because you said Fate's Warning. Did you ever play with, you
Well,
mentioned King Diamond. Did you ever have a chance to perform with him with Sacred Oath?
On those tours in the Crystal Vision era, I'd say the biggest bands that we ever played with were Fate's Warning, Warlock. You remember Warlock?
Oh, yeah.
But most of the time we were doing shows with other locals. In fact, I think we were headlining a lot of the time out in the Midwest, and they had arranged for local bands to open up. That was what was going on most of the time.
Wow, that's impressive. So unfortunately, in 1988, the band disbanded. Why was that?
Well, you got to remember that we were. I was really kind of Glenn and I were the youngest guys in the band.
Glenn's the former guitar player.
Yeah, we're basically the same age, and it was being young and sometimes I want to say young and stupid, and sometimes it was just out of frustration, and other times it was creative differences is what was going on. I think that Pete and I, we were great friends through high school, and we were great partners in Sacred Oath, and we started separating in the vision that we had creatively. Pete was definitely moving in a much heavier direction, which, was really what the 90s became all about, was what his vision was. Bands like Pantera, he was definitely going in that direction. And I was going in a much more melodic direction. And I felt like there was not as much room for what I wanted to do, and we were also very frustrated because at that time, the rock star dream wasn't working out exactly as we had planned. We realized it was a lot harder than it looked. It wasn't like, hey, you sign a record deal and everything comes up roses. It was a lot of hard work, and there was a lot of frustration, and there was a lot of times that we felt like the label wasn't, responding to our needs in the way we wanted them to. And then it turned out that the label was actually financially struggling because they had signed too many bands, and there was a lot of frustration, and we began to just get irritated with each other, and I just turned my back on the whole thing.
Okay, so you walked away.
I walked away.
Then you performed in other bands after that, like Soundscape is one of your bands.
Yeah, that Soundscape was really where I was at in the 90s. So in the time that after I had left Sacred Oath, I was living in Los Angeles, and I ended up actually out in college for 4 years, which I had vowed never to do. And next thing you know, I was there and I was loving it. And studying music and just having my mind opened to a whole bigger world of what was going on in music. And I really got into, really took the Fates Warning thing to an extreme. Like, I was really into progressive music.
One of your releases that I love, it's a rock opera.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wrote two.
Rock operas.
Yeah, I did America the Beautiful. So I did that my senior year in college, and then as soon as I finished school, I built my studio, and I made my first project was going to be producing this rock opera, which was an enormous task. And so I did that, and around that rock opera built Soundscape, because those were the guys that I had attracted to the project, and they were great players, So all through the 90s really was focused on progressive metal and progressive rock with Soundscape, and so that's what I was doing mostly in the 90s until, of course, Sacred Oath came back.
2001, that's correct. 2001, Sentinel Steel Records reissued a Crystal Vision. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, that was actually a 3-year deal. What happened was they came to me in 1998, and at that time, Pete flew out from the Chicago area, like Bloomington, Illinois, I think. He came out, and Kenny came back into the fold, and Glenn was still living in L.A., so he wasn't able to participate, but that's when we did the Crystal revision recordings, because we said, okay, if you're going to reissue this album, we'll record some of the songs that didn't make it onto the record, like The End and The Invocation. Those appeared on revision, and we also ended up having so much fun being reunited that we did the whole record over, and we ended up releasing that in 2005. But Sentinel Steel finally reissued a Crystal Vision in 2001. It took them 3 years. But that was huge because we had no idea that there was anybody actually still interested in Sacred Oath.
13 years later, how did they come to you? Did they come to you, or did you approach them?
Yeah, no, we were all not even
Thinking about
talking to each other anymore. We were all in different parts of the country. We were all in different projects and different bands. And all of a sudden I get contacted on the interweb, which was this new thing, right? There's this new thing. And this guy, Dennis Gulby, gets in touch with me and says, hey, we're interested in Sacred Oath. And I was like, what? Why? And they're like, oh, no, there's a lot of people interested in Sacred Oath, especially in Europe, and we want to reissue the album, and can you get the rights, and blah, blah, blah. And next thing you know, my eyes were open to this whole group of people worldwide that were interested in Sacred Oath, and it was awesome. And it was Sacred Oath is such a natural fit for me. I don't even have to think about it. It just, boom, popped right into being able to play those songs because we'd done them so much and writing in that style again. And so Sentinel Steel was a huge part of the resurrection of Sacred Oath and of getting Pete Altieri back into music because he had completely
he went to
stopped.
the Army.
Yeah, he was in the Army and he was, hadn't done music since 1988. 10 years, no music.
Wow.
And he called me after those sessions for revision in 98, and he goes, wow, this has totally inspired me to get back into doing this. And he started his band Low 12 6 months later.
Well, the reunion was short-lived. Why was that? Was it the same issues?
Well, everybody was living in different parts of the country, and I was still so busy in Soundscape. And so the thought of actually stopping that, I had so much time invested in that. We'd done 2 albums. We were touring. I was like, I can't drop everything for Sacred Oath. Well, let's see what happens. And then, I don't know. It had to be, the timing had to be right. And the timing really wasn't right again until about 2005 when we started recording Darkness Visible.
Yeah, which that came out in 2007.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite songs on that album is Words Upon the Stone. And you have a video for that.
Yeah.
You have a great story about that video. It's filmed in a cemetery.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Yeah. Well, there's actually great stories behind all of our videos, as I'm sure every band can say. But that was the first music video that Sacred Oath had ever done, and we didn't have a formula or a relationship with a production company. We were just like, hey, wow, this record is getting a great response. Let's do a music video. And there's a cemetery at the bottom of my street. I was relatively new in my neighborhood, It was like this guy plays in a band. He's got a couple kids. We don't know if we trust him yet in the neighborhood. And next thing you know, it's Memorial Weekend on a Sunday morning, and we're loading our gear into the middle of the graveyard, set up, blasting, shooting this thing for a couple hours. And it was like the hottest day of the year too. You remember that? Hot, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, by 11 in the morning, it was like 98 degrees, and the wraps on the drums started bubbling and wanting to peel off. So that was Kenny was like, "We got to finish this thing, or the drums are going to come apart." But what ultimately got us to stop was the final shots we did were of us on the front of the cemetery facing the street, and they were doing these drive-by shots in the back of a flatbed truck, and traffic just started going haywire. People were backed up, pulling out of their cars, watching, and the cops showed up, and the cop pulls me aside and he goes, technically, you're not doing anything illegal, but you're really starting to create a traffic hazard. Can you wrap it up in like 15 minutes? And I'm like, you know what, dude? We're almost done. We'll be done in 15 minutes. And
that was good.
Yeah. And that was one of the stories behind that video.
I love that video, though.
Yeah, my son. There's a lot of funny things in that video. Like my 2 daughters showed up in like Disney princess dresses. I was like, film them running through it in negative. King Diamond would do that. and then there's that ridiculous scene where I'm playing a stick, and then it turns into a flying V. And I swear to you, I had my kids until they were like, 12 believing that was really a magic stick I was playing that turned into a flying V. And they'd be like, wow, can you do that again?
Mommy, Daddy scares me. Well, in 2013, Sacred Oath released Fallen. It features songs written by past band members. Were they previously unreleased tracks, or were they specifically written for this album?
Some were written for the album. Some were written much earlier. And the whole motivation behind that album was the 25th anniversary of Crystal Vision.
Okay.
So it was 2013. It was going to be the 25th anniversary. And we were negotiating a distribution deal with Universal at that time, which was good. But we'd also been through a couple of rough, like, the best years are always the roughest years. I mean, we'd just put out Self-Titled and World on Fire, and those were creatively awesome years for us, but there was a lot of other stuff that was going on, and I was a little fried. So I said to Billy and Brendan, I said, guys, I got to do something for the 25th anniversary. I'm going to get Glenn and Pete, and we're just going to do this EP just to celebrate the Crystal, Vision anniversary. I said, I'm not changing the lineup. I'm not doing, we're going to still play. I'm just going to do this EP with these guys as sort of a novelty. It ended up becoming a full album because we included Lurking Fear and Dream Death, songs like that were written back in 1988 that didn't make it onto Darkness Visible. But then there were a lot of new songs written, like King of Your World, Way of All Flesh, Snake Eyes. Those were all brand new tracks. It was awesome to create again with those guys because there's definitely there's a history there.
Oh, yeah.
And we love each other, and we've had some great memories, and we do something magical together.
Family.
Yeah, it's a family, and we hadn't done something like that in many years, but it wasn't something that was going to go on the road.
Now, the title track Fallen has a special meaning. What's that song about?
Oh gosh, yeah. While we were recording that album, Sandy Hook happened. And I was in the process of writing the lyrics for the record. And that whole event, Sandy Hook Elementary School is literally 5 minutes from my house. And so I experienced it in a particularly crazy way because my kids' schools went on lockdown. I was by myself in the house. I went to my wife texted me and said, oh my God, the kids are on lockdown. There's something happening at Sandy Hook. And I went to the TV, and my daughter at the time was in first grade. And I had another one, I think, in maybe third grade. And it really shook me because I experienced that deep feeling only a parent can really understand of being freaked out about. Let me put it I'll give it to you in one sentence. What the whole song Fallen and what the album Fallen kind of is about is that you play in a metal band and you sing about evil and darkness because it's cool. In the same way that you may like watching horror films, but all of a sudden something like that confronts you with the presence of real and true evil, and it scares you. And and all of a sudden it's not funny anymore. And so that really shook me, and that was what that album and that song was really about. Just true darkness.
You mentioned it earlier, creativity, or the best creativity, usually comes out of something bad. A lot of people, when they get comfortable, they become successful, they mostly phone it in. Not all the times, but a lot of times when they're hungry and they really want it badly enough, or if something bad does happen, that really makes you think, and that's where a lot of the best creativity comes from.
Yeah. I don't know that I would always say it comes out of something bad, but I think a lot of creativity can come out of adversity.
Yeah, that's a better word.
So adversity doesn't necessarily have to be bad. Right now, I'm feeling as creative as I ever have in my life with this new album, and it's not coming out of something bad. It's coming out of the challenges of our times that we're in right now, which some people can describe as bad. And yeah, there's definitely bad parts about it. Yeah. But when I'm feeling creative, it's because I'm inspired to say something, and that's really what I've chased my whole life. Is that to stay on the chasing the tail of that feeling, staying inspired, finding out what it is that I want to say or I want to react to.
Now, do you always have a piece of paper or something near you so whenever you're inspired, all right, let me write this down, all right, I have an idea for a song? Do you always, it seems like you're writing all the time.
You could say I'm writing all the time because we're always putting another record out, but part of the writing process is not writing. You know what I mean? I work with a lot of kids and I teach them how to write and I teach them how to play, and sometimes they'll come to me and be like, "Oh my God, I've got writer's block. I haven't written anything in 3 weeks and my life is over." And I'm like, no. You got to embrace the times that you're not writing, because we're just being in the world and doing things is part of the writing process, right? You're out there, you're doing things, you're being social, you're reading, you're watching movies, you're having thoughts. Yeah. You're living in the world, and you gotta. Creativity for me comes from life experience. So, yeah, in that sense, I'm always writing. But when it's time to write it, when I'm feeling, it starts to bubble up like a wellspring, where I'm like, because literally, I think after we did 12 Bells, I kind of gave the guys a hint. I'm like, this is it. I'm done.
Oh, really?
Because I think I was drained after that. I was tired. And I wanted to do a bunch of shows, so we did 2 years worth of tour dates, but didn't feel like I wanted to write for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden I felt like, oh God, I want to write. And so just started banging out riffs and putting songs together. And then next thing you know, I started this. I don't know if you've read *Sapiens*. Have you read *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari? Oh my God, that book. So reading that and his next book, *Deus*, lyrically and conceptually, totally set my mind on fire. And that's really what was a huge inspiration lyrically behind this album. So once I fixate on something that I can get expressive lyrically in, then I'm off to the races.
Do you collaborate with the rest of the band, or do you write all the songs yourself?
I primarily write the songs. Kenny's written a song on this one, but if you look at the whole arc of Sacred Oath albums, I really creatively direct where everything goes, and I give everybody their plenty of free space to compose their solos, come up with their parts, but I pretty much write all the lyrics, and except for when Pete was definitely a creative force.
Yeah.
I think I don't do that as a requirement, but the guys can testify to the fact that I move at a very, very fast pace. And sometimes I feel guilty about that, because I'm like, okay, guys, we're going to do another record. And they're like, oh, cool. And I'm like, so bring me your ideas if you have any. And then I'm like, well, I wrote the whole record, guys, and we start recording in a week. And they're like, what are you talking about?
We're leaving for Europe on Tuesday. I don't know. You better let your job know. I can't believe it's been a half hour already. So before we go, though, we already know what's next, Return of the Dragon, and that's going to be released in 2021. Where can people find you?
Oh, well, obviously you can find us on Spotify. If you mean to listen to us, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, everywhere. I mean, we're everywhere you can find a band.
You have a Facebook page, Instagram,
yeah,
all of the social media.
Yeah, and our website, sacredoath.net. We're not always the best at keeping that. Like Damiano is amazing. I want to put him in. I want to make him our social director, because he's the young, hip.
He's an influencer.
He's an influencer. He's the young hip social media guy. But because I'm like, just leave me alone in the studio and let me work on the record. We're not so good about I don't think we've updated our website in like a year and a half. I literally, Damiano's been playing with us for like 2.5 years, and I just called Jack Walker. You know Jack Walker,
definitely.
He handles our website, and I'm like, dude, we got to put Damiano on the website as an official band member. What do you need from me? He's like, I was going to say, it's like about time, dude.
Yeah.
Hey, Jack, can you take Pete O'Terry off the current lineup, please?
Oh, my God.
No. All right, well, it was great having you. Please come back, because I do want to speak with the rest of the band next time, because Damiano, you have a very interesting story. He's known as the new rock prince. We'll talk about that next time. But until then, that wraps up another episode of Nutmeg Chatter presents The Claw's Corner. I would like to thank my guests, Rob Thorne, Damiano Christian, and Billy Smith for being a part of The Claw's Corner. I would also like to thank you, the listener, for tuning in every week. Enjoy your day, everyone.